This is Nina Lockwood. Welcome to Get Your Happy Back. Stories and insights that will inspire you to find new sources of happiness in your own life. Hello and welcome. I am so happy this morning to be able to introduce Robbin Jorgensen. So glad you're here because she is a totally amazing woman. And what we're really going to talk about today is what it means to thrive, whether it's from inspiration, motivation, creativity, finding more meaning and purpose. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And Robbin, if you don't mind, I'm going to read your bio because it's just so juicy that I don't want to leave anything out. So Robbin Jorgensen is the founder and CEO of Women Igniting Change. She's a highly successful businesswoman with 25 years of experience in sales and marketing, training, business development, a sought-after global speaker, certified coach, and women's leadership strategies. She's worked with women leaders on 6 continents in 14 countries. Very impressive. Robbin was honored as a human rights champion by the United Nations Association of the USA, and I hope I'm not going to butcher this too much, is the U.S. ambassador for, is it Avega Agahozo?
Wow, that was really good. Yes.
Oh, great. In Rwanda. She's been featured by the Cartier Women's Initiative, Voyage ATL, the Dana Barron Show, and the Atlanta Small Business Network, among others. She delivered the keynote address for the 170th anniversary of the first Women's Rights Convention, joining the ranks of previous speakers who included Hillary Clinton. Wow.
Thank you.
And I know there's so much more. So what I would love to start with is how things shifted for you into this field and what it was that prompted you to make the shift that you did to start this journey.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place to start. So I have a 20 plus year career in corporate America. I was a regional sales director, and it felt like the higher I climbed that corporate ladder, the more of me I lost. And I could literally feel it. And my friends and family could see it. They would look at me and say, okay, the light that is Robbin, where did that go? Because it's not there. So like, I started losing myself, and I knew that. And someone said to me, why don't you hire an executive coach? And I'm like, oh, all right, that's a great idea. And the only coach that I knew was this woman, Lauren, who went to high school with my former husband, who I hadn't talked to in 20 plus years. So I literally reached out to her out of the blue and said, hey, Lauren, it's Robbin. You do this coaching thing. Tell me more about how you do this. And so I worked with her for an entire year when I was still inside corporate. And it was so transformational. At one point, I looked at her and I'm like, okay, you do this for a living and you get paid what I get paid to do this for a living. Like, how did you do that? And that really started my journey toward coaching, was as a client first, because it was so transformative. And she helped me claim me back. So she had gone through the Coaches Training Institute, CTI. And so I started researching different coach training schools. And I was in Connecticut at the time through my work. And CTI was delivering classes in Atlanta. And I was going to Atlanta once a month at that point anyway. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to take classes down in Atlanta. And from the very first day I walked in, because they were all in-person trainings, I walked in that first day and I'm like, I'm home. I knew there was something in this area that I was supposed to do. And I think, when I was in corporate, I've always been a professional and a personal development person. I've always been a sponge for learning and knowledge. But I think, you get caught in that corporate rat race. And one, you don't take time to do that for yourself, usually. But it's a different world on this side of the fence. So I started that transition and really started opening my mind to encompassing more of that professional and personal development stuff. So I was in the coach training, and every time I went back down and came back to Connecticut, more and more, I'm like, this doesn't fit. This is not where I'm supposed to be. And I could feel that. And I'm someone who jumps off the cliff and figures it out on the way down. Not everyone can do that. But there were a couple of specific instances that really had me take that leap. So as a regional sales director, I oversaw a large sales team in multiple markets. And I was in Atlanta on New Year's Eve of 2011. And we got an ice storm. Atlanta doesn't know how to do ice storms. They have like 5 plows for the entire city. So, and I couldn't get back to Connecticut for the first week of the new year for strategy and planning and all of the things. And my boss on the phone screamed at me, "What do you mean you can't get back? You have to be here." And I'm like, "I can't get out of the driveway, much less get to the airport." So that conversation, I literally had the phone out here. And the person I was with at the time, like, you could hear it. And I hung up the phone and I'm like, I'm done. That was like the final straw. Another piece was there was something that happened at the office where I was asked to compromise my values. And I won't get into what the situation was, but that was another piece, like, nope, not compromising me and who I am. So those two things really were the catalyst for me jumping ship and taking off and leaving.
That's very powerful. So one of the things that you said that I wanted to ask you to elaborate on was
Sure.
this idea of what you're supposed to be and how you know when you're not, because I think you shared a very common experience for a lot of women in corporate where they climb up that proverbial ladder and then they get up to the top and say, wait, is this what I was going after all this time? But talk, if you would, a little bit about the feelings and that's how you knew one wasn't the right place for you and another was the right place for you.
Yeah. So I felt like every morning I walked into the office and I put on this mask, like literally I almost like a mask, because this was how a regional sales director is supposed to think and act and talk and be. And I wore that mask all day. And when I walked out of the office, I took the mask off and I was me. And I could feel the distinction between those two. Literally, you could feel it. I could feel it in my body.
And how did it feel? Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, you're fine. So, putting the mask on, especially in corporate, and I was in a very male-dominated industry in my corporate career, and you assimilate into that culture without even realizing that you're doing it. Mm. You just, you take it on as like a jacket that you put on and you don't even know that you're doing it. But outside of the office, I felt more free. I felt more able to speak my mind and say what I wanted to say. I wasn't so buttoned up and cautious in how I did things. I was just me, like energetic, bubbly, like this is me. But in the office, I was much more reserved, cautious in what I wanted to say. And part of that was the nature of the management that I was under, because it was an old style school of management. It was fear and intimidation. Mm. So in that realm, I lost confidence in my abilities, and I'm really good at what I do, but I had lost that. Mm-hmm. To the point where you're afraid to say something because you know it's going to get shot down or it's going to be dismissed in front of other people. And all that takes a toll. It takes a ding on your confidence. And then you start to believe all of those things in your head. Never believe what you think most of the time, side note. Right. So you take that on and you start to believe that that's the truth of who you are versus the real truth of who you are. Yeah. And sometimes you need a coach to help unpack that, to claim yourself back.
Absolutely. And I think, and I'd love to know your thoughts about this. I think particularly for women, as they go farther up that ladder, one of the things when there is that mismatch of the mask and the real person is that responsibilities get overwhelming and exhausting, because you can't draw from your own genuine resources.
Right.
So that you end up not taking care of yourself, taking care of everybody else but you. Right. And you're exhausted by the end of the day because you're not in alignment with what's your truth.
Well, it takes a lot of energy to not be fully you. It takes a lot of mental energy to not be fully you. And in my case, if we didn't answer a text message Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, you didn't want to show up Monday morning. So it was very much, and I know other women can relate to that. There was no off button. So to your point of doing the self-care and taking care of yourself, there was no off button. You were expected to respond whenever something came in. You were expected to answer emails at 8 o'clock at night. There was no 5, 6 o'clock, turn it off, and now you get to enjoy you. That wasn't the case. And that can get exhausting.
Yeah, and we both have seen many, many women in that situation. So was your experience the catalyst for your going in this direction of helping other women?
Yes and no. So when I left corporate and I started Women Igniting Change in March of 2011, the first thing I started doing was sales coaching, because that's what I knew. I was a sales director, and I did it for, a little bit, like literally a couple of months. And I'm like, yeah, like I just knew it wasn't it. But going through the coach training with CTI, I went through the coach training, which is a 6-month curriculum. And then I went through certification to become a certified coach. And then I went into their year-long leadership program. And their leadership program is 4 week-long retreats in Asheville, North Carolina. And that program, I felt like I walked in as corporate Robbin and I came out as me. That program was the biggest gift I've ever given myself outside of my children. It was that transformational. So through that process of doing that, on the other side of that program, I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to go back in and serve the woman I used to be. Because I felt strong enough back in my own sense of self, my own confidence, my own self-worth, that I could go back in and serve the woman who's still wearing the mask and say, no, lead from here. Get that off. Like, give me you. So that's really what started that.
Wow, that is so great. So I have a question for you, which I think many women struggle with when they know it's time to change, but they don't know how to get there. And you said something about, when it fits. How do you know when something fits?
So here's working with women for the past 12 and a half years, here's what I know that we do. We have this inner, whether you call it gut, tuition, spirit, universe, we have this inner knowing that we have stopped trusting. We all have this. She comes up and she gives you something, and then all of a sudden you just go, yeah, and you push it aside and you go do something completely different. So it's getting quiet enough to listen to that, because that inner guidance, gut intuition, that will never, ever, ever steer you wrong. But we've dismissed it so much because we're like, oh no, I can't possibly do that. And you just like push it away because you're like, oh no, I can't listen to that. Well, yeah, you can, and you need to. So that's where you have to just start getting quiet enough to listen to that. Because if we don't know the how, we think it can't happen. The how is none of your business. The how is none of your concern, because whatever that idea is that is inside of you is given to you for a reason. And it's meant to happen because it was given to you. The how shows up as you go. And, for women that are very analytical and very data driven, that's a really hard place to be. That's not me. As I said, I dive off the cliff and I figure it out on the way down. So risk doesn't scare me. But for some women, that is a really scary place to be. And trusting something that you've conditioned yourself not to is really hard sometimes. But that's the key.
I totally get what you're saying. I've just been reading a book recently called The Answer to How is Yes.
Exactly. I love that. Yes.
Right. And so that's not the real question. When you're asking how, you haven't listened to your gut that says, do this.
Right.
And the fear behind taking a step into the unknown is so powerful that that's when we start asking how rather than asking why.
So I love that. Can I jump off from that? Because I love that you said why. One of the workshops that we deliver is called The Bigger Game. And it's a 9-square tic-tac-toe board. And one of the squares is compelling purpose. And that's the why square. That's the reason why you do something. The square to the left of that is the hunger square. Like, obviously not food, like that deep desire and wanting for something more that's bigger than just you, like wanting for something more than just yourself. And we equate that square to a dial, like 0 to 10, because when we were little girls, we knew our hunger dial was off the charts. We could be anything and do anything we wanted. But as we become grown women, we take that dial and we tend to turn it down to a dull simmer, because we become so afraid to want for anything because we don't want to be disappointed if it doesn't happen. So we just turn that hunger dial down and we just live at a dull simmer. So that hunger square is an invitation to turn that dial back up and dare to want for something for yourself.
Yeah.
And the compelling purpose is the why behind that. So I'll give you mine just to give your listeners an example. So my hunger is to unleash the contribution of women around the world. That's the purpose of Women Igniting Change. And we do that in a multitude of ways. My why is because I want my granddaughter to grow up in a world that's totally different than the one we're sitting in right now. I want a world where she is celebrated for everything that she can be. And I want a world for women in the developing world where we work to be able to have those amazing opportunities because they have the same talents and gifts that we have here in the Western world. So that's my why. That's my beacon. And that why pulls me through every fear, anything that gets in my way, because that has to happen. So that the compelling purpose has to be so strong that will pull you literally through the fear of making it happen.
Love that. So we need a second conversation, I'm sure, but I would love to know, in your experience, what you have seen as the biggest causes of women being willing to make change and claim their own lives, reclaim their lives, really. What do you think are the biggest, maybe 2 or 3 that get in the way?
Yeah, the first one is not listening to your own intuition. That's number 1, not listening to you.
Yeah.
2 is family, society, and culture. And that really is in one bucket, because we've been conditioned that we're supposed to do, or we should do X, Y, Z. Stop shooting on yourself. So stop doing what society tells you could do. So, example, when I left corporate America, and my mother was my biggest champion, she's my biggest cheerleader. She was like, I'm sorry, you're doing what? And you're giving up how much money to do what? Right. So when you have people around you who love you and want the best for you, they're just trying to protect you. Mm-hmm. But if they don't come from that world of entrepreneurship or doing whatever it is, and even if it's going into another career role, but it's something that lights you up and fuels you, sometimes it doesn't always make sense to the external world. But we tend to listen to that. Well, I've got the partner, I've got the kids, I've got the white picket fence, I've got the car, I've got all the things. I had all that stuff in Connecticut. I had the money, I had the condo, I had the car, like all the stuff, and I was miserable. So I equate this to, in the 1930s when they went scuba diving, we've all seen those movies where they put in that big heavy helmet with the glass.
The bell, yes.
Yeah. It's almost like you need to put that on to protect your confidence around whatever it is that you're meant to do. So anything that comes at you bounces right off and it doesn't seep in. And so you're not listening to that. I'll give you a beautiful example. We're all familiar with Sarah Blakely, the creator of Spanx. Mm-hmm. She held that idea for an entire year and told no one, because she knew people were going to tell her she was crazy. And she didn't want that seeping into her consciousness, and she didn't want that influencing what she knew, because she was listening to what she knew she was supposed to do. So she literally told no one for a year that was her intention. So it's protecting your confidence around whatever it is you're meant to do.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. I think there comes a point where a woman would say to herself, okay, I've got to take the leap. Uh-huh. And I had the great pleasure and privilege of working with someone, coaching a woman who came to me when she was 80.
I love that so much.
And she said, her husband had died about 1.5 years prior, and they'd been married forever and ever. And she said, I just feel like it's time for me to figure out what to do with my life.
Wow.
And I mean, to have that insistence of what she wanted at this point in her life. And in the course of our conversations, she spoke about how, in terms of being so formed by our society and what our parents teach teach us. She was of German descent, and she was always told to be a good girl and not attract attention.
Right.
They're so common for women, right? But even at 80, she had such clarity about how that had kept her from really being herself fully.
Yeah.
So I think that once we have that feeling on the inside, that this has got to change. Doesn't matter how old we are.
100%. Here's the other thing that inner idea, that inner voice will do. It gets louder and louder until you do listen to it.
Or your body starts to tell you.
I was just going to say that, yes, or it impacts your health. It literally will make you sick by not listening to it. Yes. So it's really paying attention. And, whether or not, your listeners do meditation, just taking 5 minutes for yourself, even just sitting up in bed before you even get out of bed, you don't brush your teeth, and you just sit there for 5 minutes and just be still, just to even start your day. That grounds you into starting the day versus automatically looking at your phone that's on your nightstand and you're off and running checking email. Like, give yourself the grace of 5 minutes a day just for you, because that's where that inner intuition and voice is going to start to show up and try to tap you on the shoulder a little bit.
I love that. One of my dear friends, Kathleen Fife, when I first met her, I think she told me that on her resume, her tagline was, "What else is possible?" And if you just think about that, 5-10 minutes first thing in the morning when you get up and you're coming to, instead of letting the weight of all of your to-do list start to make your shoulders droop, is to really be thinking about that. What else is possible? What wonderful thing could happen today? What kindness could happen? What joy could happen? Yeah. Just to reorient ourselves, as you said, not to reach for the phone as soon as we wake up.
Yeah. I have a question I'd love to pose to your listeners, because a lot of times, because we haven't listened to that intuition for decades, a lot of times we're like, well, I know I want to do something, but I don't necessarily know what it is. But I know I want to do something. So there's several ways that they can figure out what that is. But one of them is just a fun question. So if Warren Buffett took you to lunch and handed you $1 billion check and said, go change the world, you can't spend a dime on yourself, what would you do with that money? Your answer and what you're meant to do lies in there somewhere. Because what we typically do when we've got an idea, whether it's to start a business or to make an impact in a certain arena, all of the noise of, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, I don't have the money to do that. I don't know the people. I don't have centers of influence. Like, all of the noise starts happening and then it totally goes away. But if Warren Buffett just handed you $1 billion check, that noise is now gone. The world is your oyster. The money is there. You can hire the right, like, all that happens. So what would you do with that check? How would you change the world? And your to do is in that answer somewhere.
Such a great question.
Yeah.
And that's a great answer. So could you share with us some examples of what you've seen in the third world countries that you've worked with, worked in, and with the women that you've worked with, and what you've seen has become possible for them through your efforts?
Oh, we don't have enough time for all of that. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll talk about a Vega Agahozo because you mentioned them in my introduction. So a Vega Agahozo they're some of my favorite humans on earth. They are the widows of the genocide against the Tutsi from 1994. And here is the way that I describe women in the developing world. You and I won the geographic lottery by being born here. That is the only difference between us here in the United States and women in the developing world, is that we won the geographic lottery. They have the same talents, gifts, hopes, dreams. They're the same women. They just don't have the opportunities that we've been afforded living here in the US. It's the only difference. So giving them the tools of leadership, of marketing, of business acumen, and helping them realize that they can go, start a small craft business, or they can go become part of a co-op and help other women in their village or their community. So a lot of it is really giving them the confidence, not dissimilar to here, If you know, it's giving them the confidence to believe in themselves, because no one has ever given that to them. And in Rwanda specifically, in East Africa, it's really helping them overcome a lot of cultural stereotypes and really digging beneath the surface and helping unpack that for them. And also working with the men, because, you know, if the women come to a class, the men are like, well, why are you going? But if we include them in the process and have them understand, you know, how that benefits the family, how it benefits their children, how it benefits the community, they're much more apt to be okay with them coming to a class or something like that. But it really is helping them build their confidence back up, and even giving them permission to dream in whatever capacity that is for them, and, you know, making that bubble a little bit. Yeah.
So if a woman starts to have that sense that it gives herself permission to dream, I wanted to ask you about how you see synchronicity and coincidence coming out through that willingness to try.
Oh, okay. I have a really good story for that one. First, just let me say overarchingly, that's how I build my business. I just lean in and trust. That's what I do. I lean in and trust, because it's never steered me wrong in 12 plus years, but I've learned to listen to how to do that. So that wasn't right out of the gate, but a really beautiful story around that was how I got to Africa in the first place.
I was going to ask that question. So
yeah. So in 2017, I was living in Atlanta at the time, and I was delivering a workshop to some senior women at Bank of America, and it was 20 women. And it was the bigger game workshop that I had just mentioned. And at one point in the workshop, I asked them what some of their goals and their dreams were, and they shared. And I just went to move to the next part of the workshop. And one of the senior VPs stopped me and said, no, what's one of yours? Now, no one had ever asked me that in the 6 years to date of the business. And I literally blurted out, we would love to work with women in Rwanda. I have no idea where that came from. No clue. It just literally came out of my mouth. Now, I think I'd always known I wanted to work on the continent in some capacity, but there's 54 countries. So Rwanda specifically, no idea. At the end of that workshop, one of the other senior VPs came up to me and said, I have a contact for you. 20 women. Her executive MBA professor teaches at Mercer University in Atlanta. He's Rwandan, Dr. Musanera. So she put me in touch with him. So that was the first synchronicity. And then I went and had an amazing conversation with him. And this was now April of 2017. And he said to me, well, we're bringing a group of students over in June. You're welcome to join us. And so they bring a group of students over to work with a Vega Agahoso called Mercer on Mission, helping them with leadership and business and marketing. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. Done. I'm coming. Here was the challenge. And this is where you've got to lean in and listen. They were leaving Atlanta June 1st. Going to Africa for 2 weeks like normal humans. And I had committed to a speaking engagement on June 7th in Albany, New York, which of course I wanted to honor, which is now where I live now, which is home for me. And everyone kept saying to me, Robbin, you can't just go to Africa for a couple of days. That's insane. Like, you can't do that. But I knew I was supposed to go. Like all those little steps, those little synchronicities, I listened. So I went. We left on a Thursday night. It's 24 hours to get there. We got there Friday night. I was in the country Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 3 days. I left Monday night. I flew straight up to Albany, New York. I landed Tuesday night and I spoke Wednesday morning. That's how much I knew I was supposed to go. And then from there, you know, we went back under Women Igniting Change and started to spread what we do. But those little synchronicities, had I not listened, had I not, you know, when I said Rwanda and she connected me with Dr. Musanera, if I hadn't even connected with him, I would have never made it to Rwanda. And then I would have never known why we were supposed to be doing work in the developing world. That would have never led to the social impact that we do through the business now, going back into companies and helping women put some social change out into the world. So there's all of these ripples and synchronicities. And I could give you probably hundreds of examples over the past 12 plus years where I took an action and that led to a connection that I never would have met. But I had the courage to take that action, and that led to these. And like, there's literally probably hundreds over the course of 12 years, but it's how I build my business. Something comes up and I'm like, okay, let's go. I have no idea where this is going, but I'm going to lean in and trust. And that always opens up to something else.
I love that. It reminds me of a quote from an American spiritual teacher, Byron Katie. Life happens.
Katie. She's amazing.
Life happens for you, not to you.
Yeah.
And I think this is the gift that we receive every time we're willing to listen, to just say, okay, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? No baby seals are going to be killed in the process, right? And I need this. I think we get to this place of there's more. There's more for me to express. There's more for me to explore. There's more for me to be. And following those nudges that we get is key in the process.
Yeah. And going back to corporate for a minute, there was another piece that I started to notice in myself. I was in the newspaper industry, and, at that level where I was, bottom line is everything. So I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm making like a ton of money for other people. And like, there was no fulfillment that it was really making a difference in the world. But there was, it was newspapers, it was digital, it was fine. That
right.
Again, that right, putting that down, you're going to live in a dull simmer. Like looking around and saying, okay, I'm making lots of money for someone else, but right. So another thing for your listeners to pay attention to is where you start feeling that numbness, and that you're literally feeling like a drone and you're just walking around. I was delivering a workshop recently where more than one of the participants, they actually started to tear up because they said they wanted to reclaim themselves back from the job they had prior, because that's when they felt alive. And they didn't in their current role. And one of the activities that I had them do, and I'll offer this to your listeners, is to create 25 I am statements. And it's one of the ways to start reconnecting yourself to the truth of who you are, because sometimes we forget. So create 25 I am statements. I am resilient. I am powerful. I am kind. I am courageous. 25 of those, all in the positive tense. And as you're going through that activity, you're going to believe 10, 12. Keep going, like all 25. Because here's the thing, whatever you write down, it's already you. You just forgot. They're all you, or you wouldn't have come up with the word. And then the key to that is taking those out and reading them every morning out loud with conviction, like you mean it. Whether it's to the dog, the plant, the mirror, it doesn't matter. Power pose, reading those I am statements and grounding yourself back into you. And when you do that for a solid month, you believe all 25, and it just boosts back your confidence to be like, all right, what's next? Yeah.
Love that. So here's another sideways question, perhaps. Where do you see the role or the influence of whether we call it spirit or God or consciousness or awareness, that deeper knowing? Where do you see that fitting into believing those 25 statements and being able to have courage?
It's everything. It's the cornerstone of believing all of that.
Can you say more?
Yeah, it's tapping back into, again, it's getting quiet. And you could do this in the car. You can do this on a walk. Quiet enough to ask yourself questions. Nobody's watching you. Nobody cares what you're saying to yourself. Ask yourself the questions, who am I? And get quiet and listen to what shows up. What is it that I'm meant to do in the world? Get quiet and listen to what shows up. Just start asking yourself questions. Turn on the radio. You can ask it while you're driving. You can ask it when you're walking in your neighborhood, and get quiet and just start listening to what the answer is. And take the pressure off that it's supposed to be this massive, profound thing that's going to come in and just like, here's what you're supposed to do. It might take a little while because you have to retrain yourself to listen. Could take a week, could take a couple of months. All good. Still live your life.
What difference does it make, right?
But the more that you just start asking yourself some of those profound questions and just listen. And if nothing comes in, be like, all right, maybe tomorrow. All good.
Right.
Zero pressure. But just start asking yourself those questions and listening for the answer.
I love that. I think that so much of what I've seen, both in my own experience and also working with women so much, is that confidence, it's not personal. It's kind of a funny thing to say, but especially in light of the fact that we have so much conditioning, social conditioning.
Yeah.
And yet the power and the possibility and the potential that we draw on, if it was only what we housed in our own body, mind, spirit, we wouldn't get very far. But it seems like we're channels, and we can close ourselves off to something that wants to come through us, or we can say, take me, take me where I need to go. Because to me, that's what we're really relying on, this life force that is only loving and creative and expansive. And we get to ride on that road, so to speak, when we talk about courage or confidence, because it can't always come from our experience, but it comes through us.
That was me blurting out, we would love to work with women in Rwanda. That's a perfect example of that. I have no clue where that came from. That was given to me.
Yeah.
And it was given to me for a reason, because I meant to do work in that part of the world.
Yeah.
But I could have easily dismissed and said, well, that was crazy. What was I thinking? Rwanda? That's nuts. I could have easily dismissed that and not done anything with it. But again, I've learned to listen when those synchronicities happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. It was, yeah. So many things over the past 12 years were just given to me for a reason. And I'm like, okay, here we go.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. Boy, there are so many other questions and thoughts that I'd love to share with you. So please, I hope you'll come back again.
Be happy to.
And for now, in closing, I wonder if you could just share with us how people can reach you. Sure. And what you would like to share at this point of everything that you've enlightened us about, what you would say to women who, whether they're 45, 65, how to really lean into that experience of listening and trusting.
Yeah. So contact information, womenignitingchange.com. Robbin Jorgensen on any social media channels. And my name does have 2 B's because my mother didn't want anyone to call me a bird. It didn't work, but it was a great effort. So it's Robbin. So, and Jorgensen with an EN. So you can find me in any social media channel. What was the second question? Like, how can women?
Regardless of where a woman is in her life,
yeah,
she's ready. She's feeling that nudge.
Yeah.
What would you say to her?
To not dismiss it and pay attention to it. And I know I've said this before, but it really is about just getting quiet and asking yourself those questions. Yeah. Okay, I'm getting this nudge. What is this? Literally just say, what is this? What is this all about? Another thing that you could do is something like an awareness week. So get really curious over the course of an entire week around what lights you up and also what infuriates you. So it could be
that's great.
It could be, a documentary you're watching on Netflix, or it could be something in the news, or it could be something that you happen to see. And also paying attention to your own lived experience, because a lot of times the work you're meant to do in the world is something to do with the past prior lived experience to, if you're 55 or 60, something happened to you when you were 25. That could come back and there's something you're meant to do there. So just be aware and just jot down on a notebook what either lights you up and excites you or what really infuriates you. And at the end of the week, look at the notes and see if there's any patterns that emerge. Where did something show up again and again and again over the course of a week? Chances are you're meant to do something in that area. So that's one way that they can do that. And I want to leave them with 2 different quotes. One of them is a quote that I leave every workshop, every speaking engagement. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. This is how I always end everything that I do. And that is trust yourself and trust your own voice. Women speaking up for themselves and for those around them is the strongest force we have to change the world. And that's by Melinda Gates.
I love it. Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that whoever watches or listens to this will gain some really valuable insights.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. So stay tuned. We'll see you the next time.
Bye,
Bye-bye
everybody.
for now.